The investigation team found their tent, but it was torn. The fabric was ripped from the inside as the threads were sticking outwards. It seemed as if the hikers inside had cut through the tent in panic and fled. Some strange footprints were also seen imprinted in the snow. The hiker's camera was recovered, containing some eerie photographs. However, despite a thorough criminal investigation, analysis of the photos and all available records, this case has remained unsolved for the past 65 years. This is the story of the Mountain of the Dead, an incident known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. Once again, welcome to our intriguing video. On the morning of January 23, 1959, a team of 10 hikers boarded a train heading towards Siberia's Ural Mountain range. This group consisted of 8 men and 2 women, led by Igor Dyatlov. They carried a logbook in which they recorded every moment of their journey. During the train journey, Igor Dyatlov made an entry in the logbook, which translates to, "What new things await us on this journey? Will something unusual happen, or will it be just another adventure?" Over the next few days, the group traveled by train, truck, bus, and even horseback. Eventually, they continued on foot and skis. During this time, one of the hikers began to feel unwell and decided to return, while the remaining 9 hikers chose to continue with the plan. This photograph was taken at the moment when the hiker parted ways with his 9 companions. But little did he know that this would be the last time he hugged his friends. The remaining 9 hikers continued their journey, documenting everything in their logbook and camera. From the logbook entries and photos, everything appeared normal. On February 1st, they reached a mountain known by the locals as Mountain of the Dead. They spent the entire day climbing and, just a few meters before the peak, decided to set up camp. These are the last few photographs recovered from their camera. The final entry in the logbook reads, "Thousands of kilometers away from civilization, amidst the icy mountains and fierce winds, one cannot even imagine such tranquility." Up until this point, everything they wrote in their logbook was found. But what happened after this remains a mystery to this day. Their expedition was planned for 16 days, and they had informed their families that after this period, they would descend and send a telegraph. However, as 32 days passed with no sign of them, their relatives and friends grew increasingly worried. Finally, a group of volunteers was assembled, and on February 26th, they successfully located the lost hikers' campsite near the mountain's peak. Observing the camp, it was not difficult to conclude that something extremely dangerous had taken place here. The tent was buried under snow, but inside, the hikers' belongings were found in perfect condition. However, the fabric of the tent had been cut from the inside using a knife. It seemed as if something had happened inside the tent, forcing the hikers to cut their way out and flee in panic. The next day, the search for the hikers began. Outside the torn tent, footprints were found in the snow leading downhill. Among them were some boot prints and some barefoot tracks. The footprints continued for about 500 meters, but then vanished. It was likely that the falling snow had covered them. The investigation team followed the tracks and eventually reached a cedar tree. There, they discovered the remains of a burnt-out bonfire and the bodies of 2 hikers. It took nearly 2 months to find the remaining 7 bodies. The bodies of the first 2 hikers were found in a horrifying condition. They were barely clothed. No jackets, no pants, no shoes, and no winter gear to protect them from the freezing cold. When the weather archives were checked, it was revealed that at the time of their deaths, the temperature was 30 degrees Celsius. However, the hikers' clothing was more suited for a hot summer day rather than extreme winter conditions. Something else strange was found on the cedar tree. The branches were broken up to 5 meters high, as if someone had desperately tried to climb it, perhaps in an attempt to escape something. The next 3 hikers' bodies were found buried in the snow near the cedar tree. Unlike the first 2, these 3 had some warm clothing on. Their bodies were positioned facing the tent, as if they had been trying to return from the forest. However, they collapsed midway, unable to make it back. Some injuries were found on their bodies, but doctors ruled their cause of death as hypothermia, meaning their bodies had lost all warmth due to extreme cold, leading to heart failure. The last 4 hikers were discovered under a rock formation deep in the forest, 20 meters opposite the cedar tree. 3 of them had severe injuries. One had a crushed skull, another had broken ribs, and one of them had multiple fractures all over the body. Medical experts stated that such injuries could not have been caused by a human or an animal attack. They suggested that the hikers fell from a great height. However, the theory of an animal attack was considered because one of the hikers was missing their eyes and a female hiker's tongue was completely gone. The most shocking discovery was that a shirt and a pair of pants found at the crime scene contained radioactive material. Initially, investigators suspected that the hikers had been murdered. However, on May 28th, the case was permanently closed and officially labeled as Unsolved. Since there was no evidence of murder and no signs of a fight among them, the biggest mystery remained. What exactly happened to these 9 hikers? Why did they cut open their tent in an emergency and flee without proper clothing? Strangely, this emergency seemed to have been inside the tent, because outside they appeared calm. The footprints found in the snow showed that they were walking, normally not running. According to official reports, 6 hikers died of hypothermia. However, considering the state of their bodies, it was hard to believe they simply froze to death. This case spread like wildfire in the news. The hikers' families and local people began protesting against the government, claiming that the authorities were hiding the real cause of death by blaming hypothermia, especially after radioactive particles were found on their clothes. This led people to suspect a nuclear test. At that time, the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States was at its peak. Just a few years earlier, America had dropped nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In response, the Soviet Union had begun conducting secret nuclear tests. Many believed that the government had secretly carried out a nuclear test on the mountain, exposing the hikers to dangerous radiation. The hypothermia explanation was just a way to cover up the real story. The investigation team explored another theory. An avalanche might have occurred, forcing the hikers to run for their lives. However, this explanation did not sit well with experts. There was no physical evidence of an avalanche. And why would experienced hikers set up their tent in an area at risk of avalanches? Then came the final photograph from one of the hikers' cameras, captured on the night of the incident. The image showed a blurry, bright light in the dark, as if the camera's lens had failed to properly focus on something glowing. This led to new theories. Some believed it was a photo of a UFO. Others speculated it was just the gas lamp or a light inside the tent. But if this light was really from a UFO or a meteorite, then why was there no physical evidence left behind on the bodies? The truth behind the final picture remains unknown. To this day, people ask the same haunting questions. What really happened that night? Why did they cut open their tent from the inside? Why were some of them barely clothed? And how did some of their bodies end up with severe fractures when they were all experienced hikers? To uncover the truth, we must return to the very place where it all began, the tent. If we closely examine the final photograph, we can see an exhaust pipe coming out of the tent. This exhaust pipe, along with a homemade stove, was built by group leader Igor Dyatlov himself. On the night of the incident, they used this stove. Evidence of this is the cooked food found inside the tent. It's possible that after shutting off the exhaust pipe, some burning embers remained inside. This could have caused a flare-up, leading to an accidental fire. When the rescue team found the tent, the exhaust pipe was missing. This suggests that instead of venting out, the smoke had filled the tent. As a result, the hikers began suffocating. Panicked, they cut open the tent with a knife and ran outside. There is strong evidence supporting this theory. Burn marks were found on the hikers' clothes and bodies. Some hikers had blood coming out of their mouths. When toxic, unfiltered smoke enters the lungs and throat, it can cause internal bleeding, leading to blood oozing from the mouth. After escaping the tent, the hikers walked calmly in search of shelter. Slowly, they made their way down toward the forest, where they built a bonfire. The burnt remains of this fire were later found by the investigation team near the cedar tree. 2 hikers who were not wearing warm clothes sat near the fire to keep warm. 4 hikers who had warm clothing went deeper into the woods to collect more firewood. Unfortunately, they triggered a small avalanche near a rock formation and fell onto the rocks below. The remaining 3 hikers tried to return to the tent, but froze to death on the way. When the fire eventually burned out, the 2 hikers near it also froze to death. This is how all 9 hikers lost their lives. Now, about the radioactive particles found on some of their clothes. 2 hikers from the group worked at a top-secret nuclear facility. The contaminated clothing belonged to these 2 hikers. As for the missing body parts, it is believed that wild animals scavenged their bodies after they fell. In the end, only 1 hiker survived, the one who turned back due to illness at the beginning of the journey. He lived until the age of 77 and passed away in 2013. We hope you show the same love and support for this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon for more informative content. Thank you.